They remember him as a knight of Valenmore. They carved his name into stone and called it honor. But I remember him differently. I remember the way he stood 3 steps behind me, as if distance could save us both. I remember how he loved me, without ever daring to hope. This is not the story the kingdom tells. This is the story I never spoke aloud. The bells of Valenmore rang, the morning I was crowned the queen. They were not bells of joy. They were bells of duty, deep, echoing and unavoidable. I remember standing on the palace balcony, the weight of the crown, unfamiliar against my brow. My hands trembled, just slightly, as the people gathered below. They looked up at me with hope in their eyes, believing I would save them from the wars that had shaped their lives. What I did not know was that fate had already chosen the man who would save me. His name was Sir Cailan Ashford, and he stood below, silent, unmoving, as though the world could pass him by without leaving a mark. They appointed him commander of the royal guard, the same morning I became queen. I noticed him immediately, not because he was the tallest, nor the most adorned, but because he did not look at me the way the others did. Most men stared with ambition, some with curiosity, a few with something far more dangerous. Cailan did not stare at all. When he knelt to swear his oath, his voice was steady, unadorned by pride. I will guard the queen, with my breath and blood. I will serve, without desire, and I will protect her without reward. At the time, I thought it was merely loyalty. Only later did I understand it was a warning. My marriage to King Roderick had already been decided before the crown ever touched my head. Peace demanded it. The kingdom required it. And so I agreed, not because I loved him, but because I believed sacrifice was the price of rule. If Roderick was not cruel, that would have been easier. Instead, he was distant, calculating, a man who valued stability more than souls. I learned quickly how to sit beside him without being seen. And in that silence, I learned how deeply loneliness could echo inside marble walls. Sir Cailan Ashford followed me everywhere, through torchlit corridors, across echoing courtyards, into council chambers heavy with politics and unspoken threats. And yet, he never crossed the invisible line. He never brushed my hand, never lingered close enough to tempt rumor, never allowed himself even the smallest indulgence of familiarity. I learned his presence, the way one learns a prayer, quietly, instinctively. I knew when he stood outside my chambers at night, because sleep came easier. I knew when he was absent, because the palace felt hollow. And still, we never spoke of it, because to name something is to give it power. It was raining, the night I finally broke. I remember stepping into the eastern garden. The scent of wet stone and night-blooming flowers clung to the air. I told myself I needed air. What I needed was truth. When I heard footsteps behind me, I did not turn at first. "Sir Cailan," I said softly. "You need not follow me tonight." He bowed, as always. "My life exists to guard yours, Your Majesty." I turned then, and for the first time, I allowed him to see how tired I was. "That," I told him, my voice trembling despite myself, "is precisely the burden." Rain gathered in my hair, in my lashes, between the words I could not say. For a moment, only a moment, I wondered what would happen if I reached out. Instead, he stepped back. I have ruled kingdoms since that night, but I have never witnessed greater courage. From then on, everything became sharper. Our glances lasted longer than they should have. Our silences said more than any confession. And the King Roderick began to watch. I felt it in the way guards shifted positions, in the way conversations died when Cailan entered a room, in the way my husband's eyes lingered, measuring and weighing. Love does not need words to become dangerous. Sometimes All it needs is restraint. I did not know, then, how this story would end. I did not know that silence would cost us everything, or that loyalty would be used as a weapon, or that love, untouched, could still destroy a kingdom's lies. I only knew this. The man sworn to protect me was the one thing I was never allowed to desire, and fate had already begun to move. There are seasons of waiting that teach you patience, and then there are seasons that teach you how to survive despair. The weeks after Kaelan was sent away blurred into one another, each day marked by the same hollow ritual: counsel in the morning, silence in the afternoon, and sleeplessness at night. I learned how loud absence could be. Without Kaelan, the palace felt larger than it ever had before. Corridors echoed when I walked them. Doors closed more quickly. Guards bowed deeper, spoke less, but watched more. I told myself it was imagination. That grief sharpened the senses. But even now, years later, I know the truth. The palace had changed, because I had changed. For the first time since becoming queen, I was afraid. Not for my crown, but for a man whose fate I was forbidden to ask about. Sleep abandoned me quickly. I would lie awake, staring into darkness, listening for footsteps that never came. Sometimes, I imagined I heard his armor beyond my door, the familiar pause, the quiet certainty of his presence. I would rise then, heart racing, only to find the corridor empty. I began to speak to him in my thoughts. I told him of small things, how the roses in the eastern garden had begun to wilt, how the council argued endlessly over borders that never held, how the crown felt heavier with each passing day. I never allowed myself to speak of fear. Queens are not permitted that indulgence. Reports came, in fragments. Battles without victories. Villages abandoned. Regiments reduced to shadows. I learned to read between the lines, to recognize when truth had been dressed in careful language. Casualties are significant. Command has not reported in full. Strategic retreat remains ongoing. I asked once, only once, if there had been word from Sir Kaelan Ashford. The room went quiet. A minister cleared his throat. No confirmation, Your Majesty. No confirmation. Not alive. Not dead. Just erased. There are things I only learned much later. Truths that arrive long after. They can change anything. Kaelan had written to me. Not a confession. Not a plea. Just a farewell shaped like restraint. He never sent it through official channels. He knew better. But the letter never reached me. It burned somewhere between the borderlands, and my hands, reduced to ash, by men who feared what words could do. I sometimes wonder if I would have been braver had I read it, or if it would have broken me sooner. They told me during court, as though such things belonged among treaties and tax disputes. My husband rose. His voice was steady, measured, distant. Sir Kaelan Ashford has fallen in battle, he announced. He died with honor, in service to Valinor. The room bowed its head. I did not. I could not. The words felt unreal, too neat, too final. Dead, the sound of it echoed inside me, like a bell that never stopped ringing. I remember standing there, my hands clenched so tightly, I felt nothing at all. I said nothing. I did not cry. I walked from the hall, with my spine straight, and my heart in pieces. That night, alone in my chambers, I pressed my palm against my chest, and waited for grief to take me. But it did not. Something colder arrived instead. I did not wear black. I did not retreat. I ruled. But something inside me withdrew, something soft, something hopeful. I stopped wandering the palace, stopped visiting the gardens, stopped believing silence could be safe. The eastern garden became unbearable. Every stone remembered him. And so I learned to forget. Or at least, to pretend. My husband, King Roderick, changed after Kaelin's death. Or perhaps, I finally noticed. He spoke more freely now. Less guarded. Lord Maelor stood closer at his side, whispering counsel that carried the weight of inevitability. I watched orders pass across the table, orders that favored sacrifice over strategy, loss over preservation. I began to understand. Kaelin had not been sent to fight. He had been sent to disappear. And he had not been the first. Grief reshapes us in ways love never could. I stopped asking permission, stopped deferring judgment. I listened more than I spoke, and remembered everything. When I began visiting the archives late at night, no one questioned me. Widows are allowed their solitude. And in dust-covered ledgers and forgotten reports, I saw the pattern clearly at last. Men removed quietly, truth buried carefully, honor used as a shroud. For a long time, I believed Kaelin was gone, not because I trusted the words spoken in court, but because believing it was the only way I could keep breathing. I mourned him alone. I buried him nowhere. And in the quiet moments, when the palace slept, I allowed myself one truth: he had loved me, and I had loved him back. Silently, uselessly, and too late. Time does not heal all wounds. Some, it simply teaches us how to carry without collapsing beneath their weight. Years passed after they told me Kaelin was dead. I learned how to rule with steadier hands, how to smile without meaning it, how to let silence answer questions better left unspoken. Valinor prospered, or so as the chroniclers wrote. Peace, they said, had returned. But peace built on buried truth always rots. And rot, no matter how carefully hidden, always rises. Grief did not make me fragile. Instead, it made me attentive. I stopped accepting reports at face value. I asked for records that had not been opened in decades. I began to notice patterns others dismissed as coincidence. Battalions were sent without support. Commanders praised only after death. Questions answered with reassignment. And always, the same signature at the bottom of the page. Lord Maelor's signature. By the time I understood what Kaelin's exile truly was, it was already too late to save him. Or so I believed. I did not go to the Eastern Garden looking for him. I went because grief still lived there, because the guards avoided it, because sorrow was allowed to exist where power pretended not to look. I remember sensing someone before I saw him. A presence. When I turned and saw him standing there, thinner, scarred, unmistakably real, my breath left me, as though my body no longer remembered how to hold it. My mind rejected him first. Then my heart followed. Kaelin, I whispered. He knelt instantly. My queen. In that moment, the years between us collapsed into nothing. They had told me he was dead. I had buried him in my heart because I had no other choice. You are dead, I said, the words trembling despite my effort to steady them. They told me you were dead. I was meant to be, he replied softly. And with that single sentence, everything I had endured rearranged itself into something colder and clearer. We did not embrace. Not yet. The weight of what stood between us was too great. He told me everything. The regiment sent without reinforcement. The letters intercepted. The orders that guaranteed failure while calling it strategy. He spoke without anger. That frightened me more than rage ever could. When he finished, I closed my eyes. I mourned you, I said. I buried you. I know, he answered. And I am sorry. Do not, I told him. Do not apologize for surviving. That was the moment I stopped bowing, not just to him, but to the lie I had been living inside. I told him he could not stay. He told me he had not come to reclaim anything. I came to protect you. I laughed then, softly, painfully. You always do, I said. Even when it costs you everything. And for the first time since the night everything began, I reached for him. No gloves. No armor. Just skin against skin. The touch lasted only a moment, but it shattered years of restraint. When I let go, we were both trembling. "If you stay," I whispered, "we will destroy each other." "If I leave," he replied, "they will destroy you." The truth settled between us, unavoidable and merciless. We did not speak our decision aloud. We did not need to. He would remain hidden, a ghost gathering truth, and I would remain visible, a queen dismantling lies from the inside. Love would have to wait, but justice would not. As he faded back into shadow, the garden felt smaller and heavier. I did not know then that someone had been watching. That silence had already been broken. That our alliance had been witnessed before it had even begun. Some betrayals announce themselves. Others begin with a single unseen pair of eyes. The most dangerous lies were never spoken aloud. They were performed, rehearsed in silence, perfected in public, and rewarded with applause. And I performed mine flawlessly. For weeks ago, I wore grief like armor, not the kind that rattles or gleams, but the quiet kind. The kind that convinces others you are fragile, while ensuring they never see where you are strongest. I became the composed queen, the obedient consort, the woman who had already lost too much to risk asking questions aloud. I bowed when expected. I smiled when required. I stood beside a throne that believed itself unchallenged, and allowed the court to believe that whatever fire once lived in me had finally burned itself out. They watched me carefully, then less so, then not at all. They mistook my stillness for surrender. They mistook silence for acceptance. They mistook grief for weakness. They always do. They do not understand that stillness can be a weapon, that silence can sharpen thought, that a woman who stops speaking is often listening more closely than anyone in the room. While they spoke freely above polished floors and painted ceilings, truth moved elsewhere, beneath the palace stones, beyond sealed stairwells and forgotten passages, where history had been walled up and left to rot. Kaelan moved unseen, not as a knight, not as a hero carved into song or stone, but as something far more dangerous, as a living truth, one the kingdom had tried to bury, disappear, erase, and failed to kill. And while they celebrated my quiet obedience, they never noticed the ground shifting beneath their feet. Because lies, no matter how perfectly performed, always tremble when truth is still breathing. Kaelan placed the document before me, in the ruins beneath the old chapel. I did not touch it at first. I watched it the way one watches a sleeping serpent, still, silent, and dangerous. The wax seal remained intact, unbroken, untouched by doubt or hesitation. The royal crest stared back at me, familiar, authoritative, merciless. An order, carefully worded, politely phrased, cold in its precision. An authorization for strategic sacrifice. Men reduced to numbers. Lives folded into margins. Battalions erased not bit the enemy's blades, but by convenience. Not for victory, not for peace, but for ease. And there it was, the final mark that made my breath catch in my chest. My husband's hand. His seal. His certainty. I stared at that page for a long time. Long enough for memory to rise where anger should have been. Long enough for grief to speak before rage could find its voice. "I loved him once," I said quietly. The words fell from me like a confession. I had not known I was still carrying. Not as a husband. Not as a man. But as an idea, I continued. The belief that this crown could be worn with honor. That power did not have to rot the soul that carried it. That rulership could be sacrificed without cruelty, authority without erasure. I had loved that lie most of all. Kaelan said nothing. He did not step closer, did not offer comfort, did not soften the truth with sympathy, because some grief does not seek solace. It does not want reassurance or gentle lies. Some grief wants only one thing: truth. And once truth is seen, it can never be unseen. In that underground silence, beneath crumbling stone and forgotten prayers, I understood this with devastating clarity. The crown I wore was not merely heavy. It was stained. And from that moment on, everything I would do, every smile, every bow, every silence, would no longer be an act of survival, but preparation. The court was full the day everything ended. Not with celebration, but with expectation. Banners hung heavy from stone pillars, their colors rich, their weight unmistakable. Gold caught the light. Velvet absorbed it. Power dressed itself beautifully that morning. Nobles whispered behind jeweled fans, their mouths curved in practiced concern, their eyes sharp with appetite. They had come to witness obedience, to watch a queen remain contained. My husband sat tall upon the throne, crown aligned, posture immaculate, secure in the belief that the story had already been written, and that I was merely a line within it. I stood beside him, serene, composed, silent, the kind of silence men mistake for permission, until I moved. One step forward, then another. The sound of my shoes against marble cut through the murmurs like a blade. "I invoke the Queen's right," I said clearly, my voice steady, unflinching. To present evidence before the court, the room froze. Breaths halted mid-inhale. Fans stilled. Even the banners seemed to hold themselves taut. Roderick turned toward me, sharp, incredulous, the first crack forming in his certainty. "This is not," he began. "It is," I said, without raising my voice. "And it will be heard." The law recognized me before he ever could. As the documents were brought forth, sealed and unmistakable, I watched faces change. Color drained from cheeks. Confidence fractured behind practiced smiles. Men who had never feared consequence suddenly remembered its name. Names were read aloud. Nights erased from history with deliberate ink. Commands rewritten in bloodless language. Regiments that never returned, not lost to war, but to design. Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading faster than denial could stop them. Then I spoke the words that ended everything. "Sir Kaelan Ashford did not die in battle," I said. The court leaned forward. "He was sent to die." The eruption was immediate. Outrage. Disbelief. Fury cloaked as decorum. Lord Mailer rose slowly, his smile thin, the smile of a man who believed the floor beneath him could never crack. "A ghost's tale," he said lightly. "We all mourn differently." That was when the doors opened. Not gently, not ceremoniously. They opened as though truth itself had grown tired of waiting. And in that moment, as shadows stretched across the marble floor, every lie in that room realized it had run out of time. Kaelan stepped into the light. Not summoned. Not announced. The light found him as though it had been waiting. No armor. No banner. No insignia to remind the court who he once was. Just a man the kingdom had declared dead and failed to erase. The murmurs stopped. Air tightened. He crossed the marble floor without haste, each step deliberate, each echo a reminder that memory does not vanish simply because it is inconvenient. He knelt once. Not to the king. Never to the king. He knelt to the crown. To the idea of justice that had outlived the men who tried to corrupt it. "I live," he said simply. No flourish. No accusation. And I remember, the words landed harder than any blade. He did not shout. He did not rage. He did not beg to be believed. He spoke as truth always does, patient, precise, and unavoidable. Dates, orders, routes altered at the last moment, supplies withheld, battles planned to fail before the first sword was drawn. He named the dead. He named the living who had been left behind. Survivors stepped forward, men who had learned to breathe quietly, to exist between records, to live as mistakes that refuse to disappear. Letters once burned were revealed. Seals once trusted exposed as instruments of betrayal. The lies did not collapse all at once. They unraveled, thread by careful thread. Lord Mailer's hand moved toward his dagger. He did not finish the motion. It should have ended there. Justice delivered. Truth restored. The kingdom given back its spine. But desperation is reckless, and dying power always lashes out. The arrow flew, loosed by a loyalist still clinging to a world that no longer wanted him. I saw it before I felt it. A flicker of motion. A breath too sharp. Kaelan did not hesitate. He did not think. He did not wait. He did not look to me for permission. He moved. Without fear. Without armor. Without the protectio he had once been sworn never to abandon. He stepped between me and death. The sound it made when it struck him. A dull, final sound, which still lives inside my bones. He fell to his knees. The court vanished. The noise disappeared. The world narrowed to blood and breath. Kaelan! I screamed, catching him as everything collapsed around us. Blood bloomed across his chest, warm, unstoppable, impossibly real. I told you, he whispered, his breath already breaking. I would protect you. I pressed my forehead to his. Tears finally unrestrained, the crown forgotten, the court erased. Stay, I begged. Please. His hand found mine, weak now, trembling. This, he said softly, was the only ending I ever feared. Then, with the last strength he had left, he pulled me close. And he kissed me. Not as knight and queen. Not as oath and duty. But as two souls, who had waited too long, and loved too deeply, to be careful anymore. He died in my arms. Lord Mailer was executed at dawn. King Roderick abdicated before nightfall, exiled into a silence where power could no longer answer him. Valinor mourned its fallen knight. This time, truthfully, they carved his name into stone again. But this time, it was not a lie. I ruled alone. I never married again. Not because I could not, but because no crown could ever ask me to forget. Beneath the eastern garden, where rain once spoke for us both, I planted a single white rose. For a love that was never meant to be touched, yet changed a kingdom forever. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, when the palace finally sleeps, and even the walls grow tired of remembering, I stand alone by the window. The air is still. The torches burn low. And for a moment the world is gentle. I close my eyes, and I swear I can feel him there. Not as a memory, not as a ghost, but as the man who once chose me over fear. I smile then, not because the pain has faded, but because love like that does not disappear. It stands watch. It keeps faith. It endures. And if you are listening now, if you have ever loved in silence, or lost someone whose presence still guards your heart, remember this: some souls never leave. They simply stand a little farther back, protecting us still. The end.
Some loves are never meant to be loud. They live in quiet glances, in hearts that choose devotion even when the world forbids it. If this story touched you, remember this: true love is not measured by how boldly it is claimed, but by how deeply it is held and felt. May peace find you tonight, and may love in all its form never pass you by. Wait! Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Romantic Tales by Sally, your little heaven where love and imagination, storytelling blend into something unforgettable. Bye!